Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. Welcome back once again, or for the very first time, to the Thoughts and Crap Show, where today, as per usual, it's your host, Anjo, here with part 31 of Stick Tips, the segment where I talk about gaming accessories, controllers, adapters, that sort of thing. And, yeah, today's episode, we're going to be talking about the Wingman FGC2. And before we get started, just need to clarify to you guys, this is not an ad. This is not a paid video or promotional video or sponsored, or nothing was sent to me for purpose of review. Nobody reviewed the contents of this video to make sure it was appropriate, except for me. And so yeah, just gonna shoot it straight with you guys and give you my honest opinions about all these things. And by all these things, I mean I have about 70 hours of testing now and a lot of notes. A lot of notes. So this will inevitably be a slightly longer video, but I am going to try to condense it to about 35 minutes at most, hopefully. We'll see. Gonna try to not gloss over anything, but we're gonna be doing a little bit of a product overview, a look at the firmware and software for the device, various controllers and their firmware and connectivity, and a little bit of gameplay at the end just to kind of showcase what's going on, practical application. And while the Wingman FGC2 does work for both PlayStation 5 and PC, most of the controllers that I wanted to test with this natively work with PC anyway, so that's not the focus here. The focus is for how does it work for using basically any controller on PlayStation 5. And not just on PlayStation 5, but for PS5 games. Because some of their previous adapters have worked on PS5, but only for PS4 titles on PS5. So, that out of the way, everything is going to be timestamped down there for you guys, so you can just click around if you want to get to specific things. And there are going to be a number of links in the description for the various websites where you can download different things that I'm going to be talking about. So first up, this is the URL for Brook's website, and the download page for the Wingman family of converters, basically, which, yes, the FGC2 is one of them. And this came out in November of 2024. Basically, they've been working on the firmware since the first update, at least in October of 2024. And they've just released version 1.0.3.1 in December. And basically, they've just been improving the connectivity. Like, that's all they've been doing. But they have been working on PlayStation converters since, like, 2017, maybe before that. So they have basically been iterating for quite some time and just improving. So they're at a very good point now. The TLDR here is it just works pretty much perfectly. Highly recommend it. Pretty much best $60 I could have spent for my PS5, because the DualSenses, they even increased the price of the DualSense a while back. I think they're up to $75 USD now. So yeah, for less than the price of a new DualSense, you can get one of these converters that is compatible with over 150 different controllers. So essentially, yeah, just use the controllers you already prefer using on your PS5. And I feel like this is great, especially for console gamers, because pretty likely if you have a PS5, you probably have some other consoles, or maybe just some controllers that you prefer to use on PC. If it works on PC, there's a pretty good chance it'll work on the Wingman FGC2. Just saying. So, first thing up, the Brook Converter Center. This is brand new. They just released version 1.1 in January of 2025. Version 1.0 was out for a few months. I believe came out mid 2024, maybe Q3 2024. But yeah, they did a number of improvements, and I'll just go over this real quick. So, what they added. Brook Converter Center is converter configuration software developed by Brook Gaming, providing an intuitive interface that allows users to easily configure or adjust turbo, remap, macro, and advanced functions. Applicable for Wingman FGC, FGC2, XB2, XB3, and XE2. However, this is not a complete list, as I did try using my original Wingman XE with the software and it worked. So it might work with some of their other ones. If you browse on their website a little bit, you will see Brook has made many converters. So that is definitely not a complete list. Please note that this software cannot be opened alongside the firmware update software as well. Otherwise, it will not function properly. Now, the firmware update process for the Wingman family of converters has been improved significantly. I've been going through updating my Brook adapters since like 2017, I think. And the process was always a little bit of a headache. Like, you had to run the updater in like administrator mode, you had to like disable antivirus sometimes, you had to, I think one time I straight up had to run the computer in safe mode, like, and sometimes it would say it completed successfully and it actually didn't. So sometimes it would take multiple attempts. And previously there was no way to roll back firmware. Now you can easily do that. Like, you can just choose the firmware that you want in the updater software, which is so great. So great. Because it hasn't been a problem for a while, I will say, like probably a year and a half. But in the past, sometimes they would roll out a new firmware and it would actually make things a little bit worse. So maybe not for all the controllers, but when you're boasting a compatibility of like 100 plus controllers, there's a good chance that not every one of those controllers will feel better in the new firmware. So yeah. But basically this is what they added. It doesn't say very much of what they changed, but they added quite a bit to the software. So they added product usage tips, which pops up when you launch the software, at least the first time. They added a controller setup diagram, which is nice. They added touchpad functionality modes. Like, they've had touchpad functionality, they just added a mode thing. More on that here in a minute. They added controller vibration frequency adjustment. That is actually new. They allow manual input of joystick scaling ratio and dead zone values. That is not brand new. That was in version 1.0 as well, but maybe they improved it. I don't know. They added a factory reset option. It's nice to see. Added an explanation of personal data collection and controller testing feature. All great things to see. Like, honestly, I've been using the version 1.1 software for a little bit now, and it's only worked with the Wingman XE, the XE2, and the FGC2, but those are kind of the intended platforms and the ones I have available for testing, so those are the ones I'm going to talk about. And also, there was no way to update from 1.0 to 1.1. I had to delete 1.0 off my computer and then re-download version 1.1. So in the future, it would be nice to see a way to actually update the software without deleting it. But we'll see. And this is the Brook Converter Center actually running on a Windows machine. And most of these features I'm not going to use, but it's nice to see. When you connect a compatible device, it will show the device on the left, the model number, or the model name, and the firmware version, which is another great way to double check and make sure the firmware that you're on is actually the one that you think you're on. Which is fantastic. Basically, the most important one to me is the Advanced tab, which is where we have the gamepad vibration function, which goes all the way down to 30%. I'm not sure why it doesn't go down to 0, and all the way up to 200%. I don't know if this applies to all vibration motors on the controller, because some of the controllers that I'm going to be talking about here in a minute also have haptic motors in the triggers. I imagine it's maybe not safe to turn that up to 200% for general use. Just guessing, based on how a lot of triggers are built on controllers. I would imagine 200 is a little much. The main rumble motors are typically just in the handles of a controller. They can probably handle a 200% increase. So I'm not really sure if it's just the primary rumble motors or all of them. But still, I don't like vibration, so if this could go down to 0, great. But thankfully on PlayStation at least, and most other platforms, I'm pretty sure you can just disable vibration on a system level. So, kind of cool, but not something I'm necessarily going to use. Next thing is the thumbstick scaling ratio. Initially, I didn't read this one correctly. I didn't realize what I was changing. Essentially, multiplicative scaling based on degrees of movement, I believe, is what it's doing. Pretty sure. Which is probably why they call it scaling ratio. If you want a 1-to-1 of just like how far you're moving the stick equals how far it's registering the input, you can just leave this off. 1-to-1 is the default. But if you want to use this, more power to you. And they do have explanations for these functions as well. That's what the question mark things are for. Thumbstick dead zone. This is great to see because the Wingman XE, I'm not sure about the XE2, but definitely the XE had artificial dead zones. And thankfully now with the software, you can disable that, which is great. The XE2, I'm pretty sure, also had artificial dead zones. So yeah, I just went ahead and synced my original XE, the XE2, and the FGC2 to the software, and I could just create one setting profile and then sync those settings to various adapters. And because yeah, the last one was also a point of contention, the touchpad emulation mode. This has been a thing since at least the Wingman XE, the original version. And there was a way to switch between the modes via button combinations while connected to the adapter. There were more than a few times I accidentally switched between those different modes, not realizing I had switched between those different modes. And then later being like, where's my touchpad input? Why isn't this working? And then later figuring out, oh hey, I accidentally switched the mode. Now you can do that in software, which is great. and I'm hoping actually enabling the feature disables the button combination input on the Wingman device, which I'm pretty sure it does. Not 100% positive because I don't remember what the button combination is, and I'd have to dig through some of the old documentation from the previous adapters to figure that out. Although I do still have the manual for the XE2 and the FGC2. So maybe it says on the actual printed manual that came in the box. Not really sure. But essentially mode 1 is for a single button press for the touchpad. Now with the DualShock 4, it had 4 different button presses under the touchpad. Like you had a left press, a middle press, and a right press. But the touchpad itself was also essentially a trackpad. Most games did not utilize the trackpad as like a capacitive touch surface. That is the full touchpad emulation function. That is mode 2. Mode 1 is basically just for that single press, but you can still get the left touchpad press and the right touchpad press. So that's the one I prefer to use. That way I can just click a button instead of doing a button combination to satisfy that clicking touchpad input that so many games require. Alright, and real quick about the history of this device specifically and its predecessors. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but the original version, as far as I can tell, the first one I picked up was the Wii/Wii U/SW/P4 to SW/P4 Super Converter. Terrible name, really cool device. And I think it also worked on PC. And it has a wired connectivity mode, but only for essentially Wii Classic controllers. If you remember playing WiiWare or Virtual Console on the original Nintendo Wii, they would recommend a Classic controller that you plug in to the Wiimote for anything past NES. Because NES games, you could just turn the Wiimote to the side because you basically just need a D-pad, start and select A and B, which is all on the top of the Wiimote. Most other platforms required more inputs, so you need to connect a Classic controller, which you could use wired on here and use to play PS4 games or Switch games. And it had Bluetooth. It was pretty cool. It had default dead zones. It does not work with the new Converter Center software. But yeah, it was the first one I picked up. Some of these are branded as Columbus Circle. They are not knockoffs. That's just a regional thing. They were an official distributor, blah, blah, blah stuff. I don't know how that worked on their side. Yeah, some of them are branded a little bit differently. But then later, the Wingman XE came out. That is the pink/magenta one that's right next to it. And it was great. Still had Bluetooth. Connection was good. It had those default dead zones, which you can now get rid of, thankfully. And it was compatible with like 100 different controllers. And it was fine. It was on the old chipset. It was a little bit more prone to disconnects and latency and not the best in accuracy and all these other things. Wingman XE2 improved upon that and brought back the Switch functionality. So it worked on PS4 games, on PlayStation, it worked on the Nintendo Switch. It supported gyro. It supported even more controllers, like 125, I think. The new chipset was faster and more accurate, less latency. It was great. It still is. I've used mine so much. And still a good option, honestly, if that's all you care about, PS4 controllers, or PS4 games, and also being a Switch adapter. The FGC2 is pretty much an improvement in every single way. However, it does not have Bluetooth. It is for wired controllers. but they expanded the compatibility. Now it boasts 150 plus controllers that are compatible with it. Also works on PC. Has the lowest latency out of any Brook adapter I've ever used, or any adapter I've ever used. It just kind of works perfectly with what, if it works on the converter. There's very few caveats. Like, there are some things that I think could be improved in general. I'll get to those here in a second. But full compatibility on PlayStation 5. That's what I wanted. And that's what it does. It basically spoofs a DualSense controller. When the XE2 is connected to a PlayStation, it would basically be spoofing a DualShock 4. Same with the original XE, it was just improving upon that. And yeah, now full PS5 compatibility. And honestly, I'm glad it doesn't have Bluetooth. I don't like Bluetooth. I prefer wired controllers. Lower latency, don't gotta worry about battery life. It's just preferred in every single way. And again, like, if you need more like length, because cable length does become a problem at that point if you only have wired controllers. How I've had mine set up for quite some time is just have a USB extension, Type A to Type A, plugged into the front of the PS5, have that running a little bit closer to where I'm sitting in my gaming setup, and then have the FGC2 plugged into the extension, and then have the controller plugged into the FGC2. I did used to primarily have a USB hub plugged into the PlayStation 5 to have more USB Type A ports on the front, and then I would have the Wingman XE or the XE2 plugged into the USB hub. But the FGC2 has not been playing nice with either of my USB hubs, so I just stopped using them. And like, that might have been causing some kind of interference or unintended functionality or lack thereof, so I just decided to axe it and be like, no, I'm not doing that. Just to have it directly connected, and that's it. So onto the controllers. First one up in highest recommendation, the 8BitDo Pro 2 for Xbox with Hall effect sticks is my favorite controller right now, bar none, period. I will have an upcoming video on this controller after I have some more time with it. I've only had about 4 weeks with it right now. That's not really extensive enough to say like the longevity of it or anything, because it hasn't been the only controller I've been using. I have been a console gamer for a long time, so there's a lot. The controller I use largely depends on the platform I'm playing on. So like if I'm playing on Switch, this is not the controller I'm using. If I'm playing on Wii U, it's not. PS2, no. PSTV, no. The emulation machine box thing over there, no. Like, I can use it on PC natively, but as far as the FGC2 goes, this is the best feeling. Like, period. Few caveats, and these apply to all the other controllers basically that have these inputs or functions. The capture button is not mapped to the share button. That is a huge miss in my opinion. Most controllers have had dedicated capture buttons for a long time, like a number of years now, whether it's Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo, PC, third-party, generic, Android, whatever. Most controllers have a capture button. And a lot of Xbox controllers work with these adapters. And these are officially licensed Xbox controllers. It should work. And it doesn't. And that bothers me. The other thing is, A number of these controllers I'm going to be talking about have a headset jack, like a 3.5 millimeter, like 4-pole input and output for audio jack. None of them work. They never have on any of the Wingman adapters that I've used. Like, it just doesn't utilize that. But with the updated chipset and everything and full PS5 compatibility, essentially, the Wingman FGC2 spoofing a DualSense, hopefully they can add that in a firmware update. Like, the device hasn't been out very long. There will inevitably be more firmware updates going forward. Brook has been very, very good in the past about supporting their converters, like, for a number of years. Like, the Wingman XE2, I believe, came out in 2021, I want to say. And they just had their latest firmware update, I think, in August of 2024. So, like, 3 years of consistent updates. Like, just go to their download page and, like, go to any device that's been out for a while. Check the update history. It's huge. The amount of support and love that they put into their products is pretty much unmatched, as far as I've seen. So anyway, those two things. The headset jack would be great to be able to use, and if the controller isn't officially licensed like Xbox or Nintendo controller that has a dedicated capture button, I don't see why it's not mapped to the share button. Like, most of the time on, like, Switch controllers, it's like the two face buttons, the plus and minus together, and that will do the share input. It's basically just those two things. But this controller is on firmware version 1.04 at the time of recording, and it works perfectly, except for those things that I mentioned. And another quick thing, if you're in the market for an 8BitDo controller, any of their recent ones, highly recommend one of the ones with Hall effect sticks. 2, the analog stick caps that some of them come with now, the green and purple, like, that are on this controller. Highly recommend. I really, really want 8BitDo to sell these individually or, like, in packs. Because if they had, like, a 5-pack, like 5 pairs of these things, and they just sold them separately, I would definitely get one of those. Because they use, and I'll have a dedicated video on this controller at some point in the near future. That's probably what part 32 of Stick Tips is going to be. But yeah, most of the 8BitDo controllers have the same, like, size profile for the analog stick heads. They are very similar to the DualShock 4. I think that's kind of what they were modeled around at the time, but yeah, they're great. Anyway, on to the next ones. We have a number of controllers to go through. I will try to get through these faster. I just wanted to say, yeah, highest recommendation, blah, blah, blah. So next one up is the original version of the same controller, the 8BitDo Pro 2 for Xbox. The first version did not have a detachable or replaceable cable. However, it was a 10-foot breakaway cable, which is amazing because, like, the recent version, they shortened the cable down to, like, 6 foot. That kind of bothers me. The cable felt better on this one. Granted, it's not detachable, but who cares? You know? Tomato, tomato, right? But yeah, they're on firmware version 1.70. And yeah, it works perfectly. It basically feels exactly the same as the Hall effect version. This is just using the traditional analog sticks. I don't know if it's Alps or sometimes 8BitDo uses King Silvers. It might be the King Silvers, but I couldn't find confirmation anywhere as to which ones they're using. So take that with a grain of salt, but also works well. Just wanted to say they both work well. Now the generic version. The 8BitDo Pro 2 wired controller, which I rarely see 8BitDo actually recognize that they made this once upon a time, or Midnight Dreary, or whatever. So this one works on a variety of platforms. Essentially, for a long time, 8BitDo has had their controllers have 4 different connection methods. So traditionally, it's been direct input, X input, a Mac OS kind of method, and I guess like a switch method or Android. And basically, you'd enter into one of those 4 modes by holding either A, B, X, or Y while turning on the controller or while connecting the controller to the desired platform. That was always kind of messy and not a big fan of that, but this controller is on firmware version 1.04. There was a bug previously in the 8BitDo firmware updater software where it did not update properly. Apparently that has been fixed because last time I connected it just to double check and make sure 1.04 was like the latest firmware update. It said, yeah, you're on version 1.03. Would you like to update to 1.04? I was like, absolutely. And in 1.04, they actually improved the accuracy of the analog sticks, which can confirm they definitely did. I've used this controller a lot, and it definitely has drift at this point. Only about 8 degrees, but it does have drift. But yes, still a great controller. And the analog sticks do feel a little bit cheaper. I'm guessing they used the mass-produced generic, like, Alps analog sticks on this one. But again, I've used this one a lot more than a lot of the other controllers on this list. So, yeah. But thankfully with the FGC2, it does recognize the mode automatically when you connect it, and it pretty much works perfectly. It did not do that with the XE2. You had to hold Y while connecting it to the XE2 to enter into switch mode. Basically, it would just communicate like a Switch Pro controller, and then it would work. But you don't have to do that anymore, so that's nice. Next one up, another controller I swear 8BitDo forgot about, the Ultimate Wired Controller. Sometimes you can find these super cheap, like less than 20 bucks. And this does use the King Silver analog sticks, which are noticeably higher quality than the Alps ones. And the D-pad is phenomenal on this controller, and that's about all of the nice things I can say about this. I don't like the form factor, the ergonomics are terrible, the ABXY are a little bit too rounded and close together, the plus, minus, and star buttons are too mushy. The shoulder buttons are actually pretty good. I like the shoulder buttons, and the back buttons are pretty much the same as the back buttons on the Pro 2 controllers as well. Most of these controllers do have back buttons, just that are programmable. Like the 8BitDo ones, you can program them in the Ultimate software, which, if they're the Xbox versions, you'll need the Ultimate software from the Microsoft Store. If it's the non-Xbox branded ones, you'll need the Ultimate software downloaded from their website, which is just support.8bitdo.com. Again, there'll be a link for that as well in the description. But this one's on firmware version 1.05, and it works perfectly. Also auto-text mode, thankfully, just like the Pro 2 wired controller. But yes, when previously I was using this on the Wingman XE2, it would only connect in switch mode, which was still holding Y while connecting it. I know it has the Xbox layout, Y is suddenly on the top instead of the left face button, but it's still Y. Unfortunately, you couldn't create a Switch custom profile on this controller, and you still can't at the time of recording, so you wouldn't have access to those back buttons because you have to map the back buttons in the Ultimate software. But thankfully, when you connect it now to the FGC2, it auto-detects the mode as like the Windows mode, I'm pretty sure, because I was able to use my Windows custom profile on this controller and therefore have access to the back buttons once again. So once again, this is a decent backup for me. I'm not going to use it, but I will keep it squirreled away for a rainy day in case something terrible happens to one of my preferred controllers. So again, it's nice to have options. Next one up, the 8BitDo SN30 Pro USB. I've talked about this controller so many times on this segment, actually, in Stick Tips. And yeah, they finally got that random firmware update about a year ago to 1.05, probably to coincide with the new like silver and gold limited edition SN30 Pro USBs they came out with. And it's a solid controller. It puts up with a lot. I've definitely been very rough with this controller in the past, and I tried to clean it up a little bit for this video. To no avail. It's pretty far gone at this point. However, phenomenal D-pad and ABXY, and I mostly use this controller for retro games anyway, so I don't really care. I'm not using it for full, like, modern games. There are no back buttons because it is the traditional Super Nintendo layout where it's just flat. If you put buttons on the back of it, it'd be pretty strange and you couldn't put it flat on a surface. That is one of the reasons I find the form factor so appealing. And I've sung the praises of this controller so many times, I feel like it's beating a dead horse at this point. And it doesn't feel as good as the Pro 2 wired controller, although the Pro 2 wired controller borrows a lot from this one. But, again, if you have a soft spot for this controller or have multiple of them, it does work perfectly. In auto detects mode, it's the same as the other ones. You hold A, B, X, or Y while connecting to the desired platform. It will switch between the 4 different modes. It's the same thing, and it works great. Okay, now with the late additions, I did not expect these controllers to work, and they do, with caveats. So, yeah, with caveats. So the 8BitDo M30 2.4 GHz, I think they did a soft refresh on this controller a while back. This is the older version that used the micro USB for charging. And I've talked about before how this controller is great because like latency is like next to nothing with the 2.4 GHz receiver. They did have a somewhat hidden firmware update a while back that is still not obvious on their website. So the gamepad is on version 2.08, and it works great, but only in wired mode. I was hoping I could connect the receiver to the Wingman FGC2 and then use it in that 2.4 GHz wireless configuration. No, it doesn't recognize the receiver at all, which is unfortunate because I don't really like having a micro USB cable plugged into the controller and then running to the converter. It's not the best feeling. It doesn't feel super secure on there. Maybe it's just because it's kind of old and like port and stuff. But the actual inputs feel incredible, and I know there is an updated version of this controller that is wired for Xbox. They have an M30 for Xbox. It probably works great. And I definitely want to get one and test it out. And if you guys want to help make that happen, like, you can leave a super thanks on the video, like, or stop by a live stream, leave a super chat Sundays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays. Or just channel memberships help out quite a bit too. But let me know. Also, if you have one, you have the 8BitDo like M30 for Xbox, please let me know in the comments. Like, does it work with the FGC2? Like, for PlayStation? I know it'll work natively on PC because it's an Xbox controller. It should. But that would be great. Especially for certain, like, fighting games and, like, Streets of Rage 4. The recently discontinued Genesis collection. Like, there's a lot of titles I can think of where I would prefer to use that controller for that when playing on PS5. The TMNT Cowabunga collection, there we go, there's another one. Hollow Knight, actually. This is also my preferred controller for Hollow Knight. There's quite a few, actually. But yeah, it'll work, just not with the receiver. Next one up, the HORIPAD Mini for Nintendo Switch. Hori has been making top-tier gaming accessories for a very long time. A lot of officially licensed products for both PlayStation and Nintendo. I don't know if they have done ones for Xbox. Not sure about that. But yeah, these controllers are great. Sometimes you can pick them up on the cheap for around 20 bucks. You get that same Hori like level of quality. There's a number of things I don't really like about this controller. The ABXY are very close. It's not a very tactile feel, like they just use conductive rubber membranes, which they do have good membranes, and the analog sticks are high quality. They put up with a lot of crap. It's kind of one of those controllers you can just toss in a bag, take with you very easily. There's no firmware update process. It's just plug and play, and it works pretty much perfectly. So, yeah, if you have one of these lying around, it works. Next one up, I've talked about this controller quite a few times on the show before. I think even stating in a previous episode that it's my favorite PS4 controller. Asterisk. Like, it was about the Wingman XE, I think, the original XE. It was like, hey, this is my favorite PlayStation controller. It's not a PlayStation controller, you say? Well then, let me explain. Yeah. Not my proudest work. But the PDP Faceoff Deluxe Plus is what these were originally sold as. It's plus audio. Basically, it has a headphone jack. It has onboard audio controls. It has wonderful back buttons that you can program without software. Like, again, it's one of those controllers, just factory firmware. PDP doesn't really have a firmware update process, as far as I know. I've checked around. They don't seem to on their website. I don't know if maybe they have a completely separate website where you do that. I have no idea. These are currently rebranded as Rematch controllers. However, this one was sold as a Faceoff Deluxe Plus. They've gone through quite a few different models in the past, all with kind of the same design. And sometimes they've had varying compatibility with like the previous Wingman XE models. Talked about that as well on previous episodes of Stick Tips, but yeah, it works perfectly fine. This is another one of those controllers that sometimes you can pick these up on the cheap. Occasionally I see various models of these, and like even the new Rematch ones, going for like 17, 18 bucks. Like typically I think the MSRP for 28, I think. It's one of those weird ones where they kind of just landed in between. I think they wanted to be sub 30, which is why they went for like $27.99. And I do like this controller. I think it looks pretty cool. If you have multiples of these, you can even swap out certain pieces like the analog stick caps, the face plates. There's a level of customization. They used to sell mod kits for these on PDP's websites. On PDP's website, sorry. And they are very durable. They put up with a lot of crap. And it has a headphone jack, programmable back buttons. They're pretty great. Like, I would say if you have a Wingman FGC2, and you see one of these on sale for like 15-ish bucks, it's a good backup. Like, it's a really good backup. Plus, like, there is something to be said about the simplicity of not having to worry about firmware and all that other jazz. And the analog sticks on these controllers are some of my favorite designs. Like, they feel so good. Like, the form factor is unique, and the amount the level of control they allow for is wonderful. Plus, yes, around the analog sticks, they have anti-friction rings on the faceplates, which also great to see. It's a great controller, but again, dedicated capture button is not mapped to the share input. The headphone jack does not work at all. But as far as the inputs go, everything works pretty much perfectly. It's great. And the obvious one, the Sony Dualshock 4. It works. But you already knew that. It works on PlayStation. It's a PlayStation controller. Why wouldn't it work? It works on PS5 for PS4 games. However, if you have it paired to the PlayStation, and then you plug in the Wingman FGC2, and then make sure wired USB connection communication method is turned on, and connect it to the adapter, then yeah, it works for PS5 games too, which Sony should have allowed for that in the first place, because there's no reason you can't use a DualShock 4 for a PS5 game. It has the same inputs. There's absolutely no difference except for the haptic triggers. And I think that's it. I'm trying to think of anything else, and I'm drawing a blank right now. I don't see any reason you can't use a DualShock 4 for a PS5 game. Aside from Sony wanted to sell more DualSense controllers. Probably. The DualShock 4 has a better D-pad, and the buttons feel better, and the triggers feel better. The analog sticks are more durable. Like, is there something I'm missing? Because in my mind, the DualShock 4 is just a better controller. I don't know. Let me know in the comments. I firmly believe in this opinion. Like, and I didn't even used to like the DualShock 4. It's still not my favorite. Like, everything's kind of compact and small and not my favorite. Like, this is my PSTV controller, because PSTV, you have to use a DualShock 3 or a DualShock 4. I don't have any DualShock 3s anymore, and this is our last DualShock 4. So I try to be very careful with it. It just sits in a bag on the shelf. And yeah, I'm not going to use this for PS5 games, because yes, it's reserved for the PSTV. But, you know, if you have an extra DualShock 4, it will work. And on to the bad news, the 8BitDo Pro 2 Bluetooth, the redesigned ones where they started doing the transparent shells. Beautiful controllers, absolutely love them. They do not work. I tried everything. It has a 4-way mode switch. I tried all 4 modes, both with batteries inserted and with no batteries at all, because I thought, well, maybe if it doesn't have any power to draw, it won't even try to do the Bluetooth thing. No. It doesn't do that. I believe because these controllers can do wired communication over USB. However, I think you need to, it's kind of like the DualShock 4, I think you need to pair it to the device first and then plug it in. I'm pretty sure. And since there's no way to do that on here, because the FGC2 doesn't have Bluetooth, it just won't connect. I think. There may be something I'm missing here, but I feel like I tried every single communication method and it just doesn't connect at all. It's on firmware version 3.04. Sorry, I haven't been saying some of the firmwares. It's been on screen for you guys, I swear, but I guess the last few controllers haven't had the firmware updates. Maybe I did for the last applicable one. Let me know in the comments, or don't, whatever, doesn't matter. But again, those analog stick caps, like, incredibly good. Like, if you're getting a new 8BitDo controller, definitely get the caps. Eventually they do get a little bit worn down, but you can just give them a little scrub, dry them off. Like, they come back to life super easy. It's like Phoenix down, Phoenix down, Phoenix down, come back. Yeah, so easy peasy. And one more piece of bad news, but I had to mention it because I've mentioned this controller in previous Stick Tips episodes, and it is the precursor to the Pro 2, the in-between the last SN30 controller in the iteration leading up to the Pro 2, the 8-bit SN30 Pro Plus. Why is there a plus? In the name, to indicate that it's newer than the SN30 Pro, and it has handles. Plus handles, I guess. So, this does not work out either. It's kind of the same situation. It has 4 different communication methods, just like the other ones, where you enter them by holding A, B, or X, or Y, and then hitting start. And it can communicate over USB in a wired mode, but it would not connect. Same situation. It has an EOL or end of life firmware version 6.01 on 8BitDo's website. And yeah, it's discontinued at this point, I'm pretty sure as well. Not that it matters. I wouldn't recommend this controller over any of the Pro 2s. So thank you, SN30 Pro Plus. You were a necessary step toward greatness. Thank you. But it doesn't work. So, and yeah, that's the good, the bad, the ugly. All the controllers I was able to test thoroughly and all that stuff. So all that's left now is to get to the gameplay portion and wrap up this video because it went on longer than I expected. But I did cover a lot of stuff. So I'm feeling pretty good about it. So to start this off, I have connected here my DualSense. I have 2 DualSense controllers now. I've had since I got my PS5, and one of them I've been very careful with, and one of them I've purposefully put through hell and been very rough with. They both have drift. One of them much worse than the other, but this is the Midnight Black version, and it doesn't feel great, but yeah, I fired up Cyberpunk for this demonstration, and, you know, Phantom Liberty, which only came to the PS5 version, because this is one of the few PS5 games where you can actually control both inner and outer dead zones, which is very, very nice. So, and I'll switch over to the 8BitDo Pro 2 for Xbox, the Hall Effect version, here in a second. And I have noticed, I think it's a little bugged on the PS5 version, like the various response curves, because these don't actually apply correctly, from what I can tell, and there's a lot of like ghost inputting, even on the controllers that I know don't have drift, because I've used the gamepad testers in both 8BitDo software and Brook software and on the Nintendo Switch for the ones that work natively on the Switch. And the Pro 2 wired controller does have a tiny bit of drift. The wired Ultimate does not. The Xbox ones, neither of them do. But just to illustrate what I'm talking about here, on the PS5 version of Cyberpunk, they have dynamic, sensitive, raw, and recommended, which they don't tell you what that is. That doesn't actually affect the values down here. As you can see, it's just different types of response curve, I guess. And they don't explain what each one is supposed to do. Raw seems to be bugged. Recommended seems to not be great. Dynamic seems to be the most ghost inputty. Sensitive seems to be the best one, as far as I can tell. Raw will kind of repeat inputs until it registers a new input that's different from the previous input. I don't think that's what it's supposed to be doing. I think it's a bug. So I'm going to leave it on sensitive just because in my testing that seems to be the one that works the best. And essentially, what was the description there? Maps raw controller inputs onto curve before applying sensitivity. Right. And so enter dead zone. This is what I was talking about before with the dead zone adjustment in the Brook converter center. So it adjusts the circular region around the controller sticks, the analog stick, the controller's analog stick, neutral position, where input is not registered. The larger the inner dead zone, the more you have to move the stick before the cursor/camera moves. Right. So essentially how in a lot of games, when you start moving the analog stick very slightly, and then nothing happens, and then at a certain point, usually about 10 degrees out from the neutral position, then it starts reading the input. That's garbage. I want this in pretty much every game, like being able to adjust it. Like especially if it's an FPS adventure kind of thing, anything like Cyberpunk, dude, let me adjust it. So again, this controller has drift. I'm holding L2 right now. As soon as I let go, it's going to do some stuff. I'm not touching the analog sticks at all. So this is the neutral drift this controller has. So it tends to drift to the right on the left stick. That's what the cursor is here. It tends to drift down on the right stick. And like I have to push up pretty significantly before it will start going up instead of down. And it also, here, I'll just hold up on the right stick. Yeah, it'll also just kind of list off in different directions to varying degrees of speed. In most games, this isn't really a problem because I've measured this before. It is about 2.7. However, I have noticed it still drift at 0.07. Sorry, yeah, I said 0.7, 0.07, sorry. But I believe I think they mean 7%. Because the highest this goes to is 49. So 49 is a massive dead zone. Essentially, that's like 50%. And that is exactly how that feels. Yeah, that is halfway to the gate. So yes, 0.49 is 50%. So 0.07 is definitely 7%. So on this controller, yes, about 0.8 is the safe range. And this feels not the worst. It's kind of sort of bad. And I don't think sensitive actually is the best mode because it's still doing some weird stuff with like acceleration and stuff. Maybe that's just because these analog sticks are not in great shape. Let me see if it's doing the same thing on... I don't really trust dynamic. I'm just going to stick with recommended for a second. Oh, that actually feels better. What? What? I mean, as far as the acceleration and the ADS curve, the response curve, ADS response? Whatever. That is strange. Why? 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 Alright, let's... Dynamic. See how this feels different. Oh, in case you're wondering why I'm here, I just wanted the sound of the waves and like, this is a peaceful part of Night City. some of you may know exactly why I'm here, and yeah, Judy mains for days, man. But she's not here. This is after the quest. That feels pretty bad. And yes, this is like post game. So yeah, I guess I'm just gonna leave it on recommended for strange. Maybe all the other modes are bugged? Dynamic, sensitive, and raw? I don't know. It definitely doesn't seem to be doing the right thing. So, yeah, about 0.8, about 8%. That is consistent with the drift that I've measured on this controller before. So, let's switch over to the 8BitDo Pro 2 for Xbox Hall effect sticks, which hopefully it's connected. Yeah, it is. Cool. As you can see there in the top right, it's recognizing it as a DualSense controller in wired mode. Which, okay. There we go. And immediately these sticks just feel, even at the exact same dead zone value, just so much better. Like the response curve is smooth as butter. Like, same dead zone value, but oh my goodness. The level of precision markedly better. But for the sake of consistency, wait, am I not in the safe zone anymore? I know you can go outside of the safe zone on this ramp. Yep, right there in the corner. But yeah, I didn't want to get like, you know, randomly shot or something while shooting this video, so let's see. Let's go. I mean, I guess you could apply that to like everyday life. Definitely. Yeah. So this one, it does do the slight drift down, but that's not because, like, it's doing that on the cursor as well. That's not because of the controller. That's actually because these analog sticks are a little bit softer. So that's actually just my thumbs resting on the analog sticks. And then trying to get them back. I can do like very soft circles without even really moving the analog sticks to where they start having resistance. So it's because they have less resistance. And honestly, I think it's partially in how Cyberpunk is handling inputs. Because in Dead Space Remastered, like, you can also adjust the dead zones and turn them down to 0. And I wasn't getting any of this, like, slight drifty behavior. Like, essentially what it feels like is it's actually allowing for the dead zone value to go into the negative. If that makes sense. Like, I could stay almost perfectly still. But again, the tension on the sticks is like kind of soft, and it seems to kind of just be repeating. Anyway, it's very strange. I don't think that's intended behavior. I don't think. But again, markedly better. Markedly better. And I could just turn this up to like 0.5, even probably lower. Okay, 0.2, it starts. Actually, no. 0.2 is. perfectly still. Markedly better. And again, I pulled this up in the gamepad testers. It has zero, the controller has zero drift. Like, even the previous Xbox version that doesn't have the Hall effect sensors, that controller also zero drift. Even the Bluetooth version that I've used a lot, I pulled up in the testers for the analog sticks, zero drift. Like, zero. So I think it's just Cyberpunk PS5 version being weird. Probably gonna leave Enter Dead Zone to like 4 or 5 just to, you know, avoid some of those things, because I do like having the very, very slight... Yeah, like when I actually start pushing a direction, it is still registering that. So I'll probably leave it at, what is this, 4 or 5%? 5%. I'll probably leave it at 5%. It's because there are times I like, especially in this game, there are times I do like to just kind of chill and like, that's nice. You know what I mean? Just like watch the day cycle just go, you know? Or times in conversation when I don't want the camera going all over the place. But anyway, but yeah, that's gonna do it for today. That's kind of everything I wanted to talk about, and we're over an hour, but you know what? It's fine. I covered all the things. This video is going to be timestamped, and I know it's an hour-long video talking about this new adapter and stuff, but I had pages of notes. Like over 70 hours of testing, like with like a dozen controllers. Like I had it was going to be a large video. So if you enjoyed it, let me know. If you have other input, please put it in the comment section and start that conversation down there. If you see somebody already posted something that's like, oh hey, I was going to post about that, if you can add to that, you know, just remember, be civil, be constructive, have fun down there, and I hope you guys did enjoy. And at the end of the day, to anybody that's in this very familiar situation of like, I don't want to buy a new DualSense, but this one is getting terrible and I don't even really like the way it feels. I wish I could just use my Xbox controller or a Nintendo Switch controller on the PlayStation 5 so I can play blank. There's a very good chance that is a possibility. And again, cheaper than buying a new DualSense and gives you a ton of options for various controllers. Like, yeah, it's a great option, which, unlike a couple of years ago, I can now just recommend without any caveats. Like, or very few caveats, depending on the controller, if I've, you know, tested it out and stuff like that, and I can confirm, oh yeah, this works, but this and this and this, or this works and this and this and this. And it's just going to get better. Like, I have full faith. There are going to be more firmware updates for the device in the future that will improve the functionality of it. Because, yeah, like in the past, they've done that very consistently for their other Wingman converters. So, and this one's only been out for what, like at the time of recording, like 3 months is when it hit the market. So, yeah, I got full faith in this one. Especially because so far, it's basically been perfect. I just want to see those couple of things addressed. Maybe added compatibility, because more options is always good. You know, utilize those capture buttons and those headphone jacks. You know, that'd be great. Because, like, I have an audio setup. I don't need the headphone jack, but maybe sometimes I want to turn it off and just use the headphone jack for audio, or maybe to take part in a PSN chat and be like, oh, just connect the headset to the thing connected to the Wingman FGC2. Convenience, you know, it'd be cool. But anyway, thanks for being here, guys. Really appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed. Of course, before we get going, it's time for the outro, the special thanks, the updates, all that good stuff, and a very special thank you going out to the current Arts and Crafts Show members, the amazing people who helped make it possible: Navalis Draconis, Aaron Schick, 97 Johnny Boy, and Big Diarrhea Dump. Thank you so very much for choosing to support the show a bit more directly via channel membership. Vastly helps out and very much appreciate it, and it is very much optional, so thank you for that. Before we get into the membership tiers, in case you guys are unfamiliar with YouTube handles, that is why 97 Johnny Boy has an @ symbol in front of the screen name there. He has a great channel of his own. It's wonderful stuff, and highly recommend it. So yeah, definitely go check that out, which you can easily do because YouTube handles make navigation quite a bit easier. You can punch it into YouTube search, it'll narrow it down, and by it I mean your search results down quite a bit if it's an applicable handle to a channel. Or you can just go straight there by going to youtube.com/@97johnnyboy. Or any other applicable handle. Like, it makes URLs a lot shorter. And yeah, membership tiers start at $3 a month. It's only 10 cents a day, gets you into all the basic stuff, including getting to vote on the series get made here on the channel via the Members' Choice Polls. It's a thing we do once a month for a full 7 days over on the membership tab. And we did just wrap one up. By the time this is coming out, I believe this video is coming out early February, probably the 1st or the 2nd. So we did just wrap one up at the end of January. So the Members' Choice Poll for January 2025 was the last week of the month. It was posted on the 24th, going up until February 1st. And that was deciding the series that would follow Tears of the Kingdom. But we will have another new one for February. I don't know what it's going to be for. I'll kind of have to play it by ear, and I'll let you guys know as we get closer to like halfway through the month. Because the next 2 Retro Classic series are already decided, and Sekiro won't be going anywhere for quite a while. Because that is going to be a complete series, and in order to be a complete series, I have to do the 4 endings. So, yeah, it's going to be a while. But if you are a new channel member, and there are likely a number of Members' Choice Polls that you may have missed, you can still vote on those. Like, even if you're just a member for 1 month, you can vote on as many Members' Choice Polls as you want. And there are like 30-something over there at the time of recording, so you'll still be influencing content that gets made here for quite some time, because retroactive input on previous polls is considered for future ones, and I will bring back popular options from previous polls. But, oh, and I should mention, we do have a more expensive membership tier here. If you want to do that one, I'll put a special thing by your screen name on the members wall. It's, if you want to be more generous, that's pretty much all it's for. It's just another thing there. There's no huge difference between the two. But again, it's all very much optional. Like, if you can afford it, great. If you can't, I get it. It's fine. But there was another thing. This is a story. No, this is an approximation of future announcements from the past. So if you guys want all the announcements as they happen and the bell doesn't work for you, I totally get it. The bell does not work for me either, but there are 4 other ways you guys can stay up to date. Yes, 4. We have the community tab here on the channel, the Farts and Crap Show Twitter, the Bluesky, or the Discord. I always post on all 4 whenever there's an announcement, so regardless of which one of those works for you, you can stay up to date. And links for those are down in the description, also on the channel banner. And And there are going to be a number of links in the description. They'll all be labeled, but 2 applicable things I was talking about, and also the 4 different methods. But yeah, thanks for being here, guys. That's going to do it for this massive episode. Next one's going to be a lot shorter. Stick Tips Part 32, as I mentioned before, is going to be about that 8BitDo Pro 2 for Xbox with the Hall effect sticks. I'll let you guys know. It's kind of going to be a follow-up a little bit because I do need to put a lot more testing on the controller to really have any kind of useful info for anybody. Because if a controller feels great out of the box, who cares? I want to know how it feels after like 100 hours of testing. You know what I mean? Anyway, it's going to do it for now, though. So, thank you all once again for being here, guys. Till next time, take care, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.